Found himself cause of all of this, not by the surroundings, not by the environment, but simply because that's the choices that he made.
Mercury Morris, a former athlete who served time, is talking about another athlete about to serve time, apparently. Unlike Mercury Morris, however, Mike Tyson's athletic career may be over because of his guilty verdict. Tyson's not the only former champion who will be likely to spend time in prison. Last week, Trevor Berbick, like Tyson, convicted of rape, this time in Miami. On lesser but no less disturbing developments, former champion Buster Douglas was charged with driving under the influence in Ohio, and former champion John Tate charged with assault in Tennessee. Boxing no longer has any black eyes left, it's been said, but the current litany of fighters' trouble with the law raises some questions. Is it the environment that breeds the deviant behavior of an athlete, or is it money, promises, protection, a false sense of self-importance? Or is it merely one man's inability to obey moral and legal laws? Today we'll discuss that issue with a writer and a fighter. First, Montieth Illingworth, author of Mike Tyson, Money, Myth, and Betrayal, talking about how it all came to this for the former champion. Then a current champion who, like Tyson, grew up in poverty without a father. Thomas Hearns gives us the reasons why he feels the sport kept him whole and out of trouble. Today, two views of the Tyson tragedy up close.
First up, though, here is Montieth Illingworth. The name of the book is Mike Tyson, Money, Myth, and Betrayal. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. First page of the book was very intriguing to me because it's more or less a precursor of the rest of the book, metaphorically, I think. You used the quote from Ralph Ellison in The Invisible Man, classical piece of writing. This is what Ralph Ellison wrote. I'm invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. You ache with the need to convince yourself that you do exist in the real world, that you're part of all the sound and anguish, and you strike out with your fists. You curse and you swear to make them recognize you, and alas, it is seldom successful. Very poignant, very ironic, I thought. What is now visible as opposed to invisible regarding Mike Tyson?
He was part of all the sound and anguish, and maybe he finally convinced us that, in fact, that was really what was driving him to this point. And the sound and anguish for him goes back to his, of course, his boyhood. But not just his boyhood, because we can't pin this on the ghetto. It's what I call the failure of human relationships throughout his entire life with the people in boxing. Cuss, Jimmy, Bill Caton, Don King, and all these people. There were things in Mike which I think could have revived his humanity, which is in all of us and never goes away. But it didn't because these relationships failed him in every respect.
Let's listen to Arthur Ashe, as we did yesterday on our show, and this is part of an interview that'll be on in a few weeks. Arthur Ashe talking about the bigger picture, what it says about athletes, celebrity, fame, success, money, power, and the ability or inability to obey the law. Here's Arthur Ashe.
A lot of these athletes, black and white, feel that they're immune from whatever penalties may accrue normally in a situation like that. And they, well, that's just mine for the taking. And I can do that when I feel like it because I'm me and I'll be excused. It is part of a pattern which a lot of us would like to see reversed, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because that is a state of affairs into which all athletes in America are brought up in.
Specifically, at the top of the show, we itemized a long list, and ironically, within a period of about 2 weeks, not just Mike Tyson, but Berbick and Tate, and even Buster Douglas on lesser issues. But does that speak to something involved inherent in the sport, or the sporting circles itself, or society? What? The irony of all of those.
I think it's always been there. It's just a matter of when we're willing to acknowledge it and address these problems that these folks have. I think, in the case of Joe Louis, he was beating his wife, but his handlers were, keeping that under wraps as much as they could because they had so much money and involved in presenting him as, a sanitized black man for all of mainstream America to accept. And now we don't sanitize, or it's harder to sanitize our athletes as much as before.
Ralph Wiley, Sports Illustrated article writer and also a contributor on this show from time to time, had an interesting and a very controversial reaction to the verdict. He said, plug Mike Tyson into the William Kennedy Smith trial. Make Mike Tyson William Kennedy Smith. He's guilty as hell. They'll throw away the key. You agree, first of all?
Well, that speaks to the issue of how much race had a role to play in the trial he was in, or in any trial he could be in. And I actually went into that trial in Indianapolis. I was there, as you know, thinking, I was very skeptical about the fairness with which the jury could bring to bear to the evidence in the issue because of racial preconceptions. But really what I felt is that if you are a juror, there's such a great burden on you to be fair. It's a very unusual position to be in, and very few of us are ever in that. But there's a great burden to be fair and just. And I really felt as we went along that it wasn't their problem in this respect. It was Mike's own lawyers were the ones who were being more influenced by race, because they were portraying Mike in the most negative terms possible, which played into every racial stereotype of a fighter.
It is my contention, though, it was their purpose, the defense, to try to confuse the jury, to give as many different theories about this guy as they could, so that there was no clear-cut idea as to what really happened. And if they couldn't get the clear-cut idea, they couldn't, as part of the jury, vote him guilty.
Yeah, there have to be reasonable doubt if you couldn't get a
so they clearly failed in that. But you believe that there were elements of racism in this case?
There were, perhaps to the extent that the case boiled down to really a beauty contest. There was no clear and consistent evidence.
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking.
A beauty contest.
There was no clear and consistent evidence that this woman was raped besides 2 microabrasions. She had no bruises. Her clothing wasn't ripped extensively in a way that would suggest great struggle and use of force by Mike. There were no witnesses. So really what the jury was looking at was who was more credible, Mike or Desiree Washington. And in a sense, it became a race versus class issue, because they were looking at Mike, thanks to the way his defense lawyers portrayed him, as a lech, as a guy who walks around with $30,000 but doesn't carry a license, who lies to his own minister, doesn't make appointments, doesn't remember how many times he climaxes with a woman during sex, in the case of the BNGB sex they had the night before. But then the girl was portrayed not in racial terms, but in class terms. She's successful in all the ways white America can relate to.
But isn't that the same in every courtroom in America on a certain level? It's always, metaphorically speaking, a beauty contest, isn't it? Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys?
All the more reason why Mike's defense failed him.
I want you to listen to Eugene Mercury Morris again, a football player who's made a great success for himself after serving time, 3.5 years, and by the way, overturned the issue of drug trafficking in Miami, part of another interview that we're going to air in a few weeks. Mercury Morris talking about what prison can do for Mike Tyson, should he indeed go to prison. Here is Mercury Morris.
When I was there, I saw about 5 or 6 guys that I knew there that lived the same way before they came in as they did while they were there and as they did when they went out and never made it to the next birthday. So that's a possibility also. I wouldn't say that that's a possibility for Mike Tyson. He has a perfect opportunity to grow up now. Sport does not provide you the opportunity to grow up, only to grow old. You got to grow up on your own, and I think that this will be a perfect opportunity for him. So, in fact, Roy, this could be such a benefit for Mike Tyson that he could come out of this a better person because of what he's been through and in spite of what he's been through.
It benefited Mercury Morris, he says. Will it benefit Mike Tyson based on what you know?
Well, it depends what sort of person is going into the prison. The person who's going in there, in Mike's case, is someone who probably had to commit this crime sort of subconsciously, just like he had to lose to Buster Douglas. I argue that in the book.
He wanted to fail in a certain sense?
I think so, in a way to sort of get off the circus ride and out of the freak show, which he's perceived a lot of his life as being, and back to the thing that he does know. And really, when you consider his background, the only thing Mike really knows is that he can be poor, because he has been. He can be, abused and sort of alone, because he began that way. So if you believe in this self-destructive theory, that what he knows is that he can, he perhaps committed this rape to go back to those things. So if he goes into prison having reached bottom in himself in that way, maybe he can find a way to climb out again. And I think he can. I think he's a survivor, and I've always believed that about Mike.
Mike Tyson, Money, Myth, and Betrayal, the name of the new book. Montieth Illingworth, the Los Angeles writer. We'll come back in just a few moments, talk about those who serve to gain and those who will lose for Mike Tyson going to prison after this.
Up Close is brought to you by Bud Light. Everything else is just a light.
Mike Tyson, guilty of rape, will be sentenced March 27th in Indianapolis. We're talking to Montieth Illingworth, the name of the book is Mike Tyson, Money, Myth, Betrayal. He's our guest up close. Recent days after the verdict, we heard some overtures, one from Donald Trump saying that he would, quote, offer substantial sums to free Mike Tyson. Then there were 10,000 signatures on a Baptist ministry petition to suspend his sentence. I thought, when I heard this, that they were both examples of people trying to profit from Tyson, the fighter, rather than care about his welfare. In the case of the Baptist ministry, I think there was a $5 million pledge from Tyson to build a headquarters in Nashville. This, again, speaks to the bigger issue. People caring more about Tyson's value than his soul and his character.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a conspiracy of self-interest, which has always enveloped his life. What's interesting, however, is that Mike was one of the greatest or most acceptable receiving hosts for other people's projections of what they want for him or how they see him. Another metaphor to use is that he is always easy for him to fold himself in other people's egos. And he's done that from the beginning, which speaks to the original point at the top of the show about Tyson really not having a sense of self, always sort of feeling hollow inside, trying to fight and always get out of that and struggle free from that. So he looks for people like the Don Kings and the Custamanos.
The Invisible Man again. Yeah. Again, from Arthur Ashe, what disturbed him most in the aftermath, the reaction from the verdict? Let's listen to him. This is part of our interview with Arthur Ashe we did in Miami just a few days ago. Here's Arthur.
Two things that boil down for me. One is that I really do think people didn't want to look reality in the eye and say, hey, this probably actually happened and it should be dealt with thusly. They didn't want to do that because historically there were some problems they wanted. A lot of people thought that Mike Tyson should have walked like most other people walk who are white and wealthy, possibly. And the second issue was I didn't hear enough balance, even from all quarters, and when I was talking to them about Desiree Washington. Most of the talk and discussion you heard about what happened or did not happen to Mike Tyson. Desiree Washington was almost a bit player. I mean, like a supporting actress in this thing. And when the ministers gave this ecumenical meeting or gathering before the trial started and then tried to come in afterwards to say to the judge who was going to sentence him, look, put him in our care and we're going to take care of him. I want to say, where were you before the boy got in trouble?
2 points. First of all, do you believe a guilty man is going to prison?
Yeah, I really do. As the law is written in the state of Indiana.
Right.
And in the principle and the spirit of the law, which is that a woman does not lose sovereignty over her body, even if she pets with a man, and even if she agrees to go to his room at any time of day or night. That if she says no, no means no.
The other point, of course, has to do with Desiree Washington. People say, well, sure, if she files a civil suit and tries to get some money out of it, we know what her motives are. It is within her rights to do that. That doesn't necessarily speak ill of her if she chooses to go that way.
It doesn't, but I think there's still a lot of question marks about her. I really do. And I think we have to keep them in our minds, you know, what her motives were, what her background is, how she deals with this in the future. And I still, even though Mike, I think, is guilty, she still bears watching, her whole story.
Could this have had a different ending? I don't mean quite literally the trial, but could Mike Tyson's story have been a Tommy Hearns' story? Obviously, Tommy Hearns grew up in the same kind of environment, no father, poverty, violence all around. Why should it happen for Mike Tyson and not, say, Tommy Hearns?
Well, you mentioned race earlier. Ultimately, this has nothing to do with race. I think this has to do with one man whose human relationships failed him from the beginning. Because of that, there was an improbability to happiness and success for Mike. So in other words, I'm not a social determinist. Sure. You know, I look at each case individually and unpack the racial dimension or sociological dimension of it. But then look at it individually and see what the probabilities are. And in Mike's case, it wasn't that likely that things will work out for him. But they still may. He's only 25. And he's demonstrated from the beginning, and I point that out in the book, he turned to boxing before he met Cuss. He wanted to reform himself. Yeah.
If he does serve time, you predict between 3, maybe 7 years. You could have that with good behavior, which means Tyson conceivably could be out as little as a year and a half, conceivably. Do you look for him to come back?
Oh, well, if he were 20 years old, I would answer that question. Yeah, his best is maybe still ahead of him. He's 25, so I would answer it. He will come back because there's a promoter who can get a lot of money for him, but he won't be fighting at his best. His last good fight was against Spinks, and it's been downhill, ever since.
Mike Tyson, Money, Myth, and Betrayal. We're going to cut you off right there, Montieth, but thank you again for joining us. We'll have you back again right after the verdict. Thank you again. I mean, after the sentencing. We'll come back. Thomas Hearns, the former welterweight and now light heavyweight champion of the world, after this.
Music Express, voted #1 by the National Limousine Association, has offices in Los Angeles and the East Coast. Music Express can handle your corporate needs anywhere in the U.S. and worldwide.
This was a great moment in the career of Thomas Hitman, or Motor City Cobra, Hearns, knocking Sugar Ray Leonard down in the fight a couple of years ago. Tommy Hearns, 53-1 with 40 knockouts. We'll have another fight coming up March 20th at Caesars Palace on TVKO. We'll have a chance to avenge a loss to Iran Barkley. And this was a great war, as you saw, with Sugar Ray Leonard. We're looking for another war coming up March 20th, and here is Tommy Hearns. Good to see you again, Tom.
Thank you, Royce. Good to see you.
I want to discuss a little bit, before we get a chance to talk about the Mike Tyson case, as we did just a few moments ago. Let's talk about the Barkley fight and what it means to you to get revenge, because it was a dark mark in your career. I know you want this one very badly.
It means a great deal to me to be able to get revenge back on Iran Barkley. They are building this fight as the sluggers.
And here it was when you fought him.
Yeah.
And you're the one who got slugged a little bit.
Yeah.
Was it a lucky punch, Tommy?
That was a luck. I mean, regardless of whether it was a lucky punch or what have you, he connected, and he came out victorious in that fight. And it just got to be a different fight, totally different fight.
How is it going to be different?
Because I'm going to be alert. I'm going to be more alert and be constant. I'm going to be busy.
Did you take him for granted, you think?
No, I didn't take him for granted. It's just that I was doing what I wanted to do in the fight. And then I decided that to slack off. And as soon as I slacked up, he just came on strong.
Tommy, you're the last of the Mohegans. You're the last of the great fighters from our generation. I mean, Hagler is gone and Sugar Ray is gone now. I don't know how much longer you're going to stay around.
What do you mean from our generation?
From our generation.
Okay.
But what about that? Do you feel that you're carrying a torch for a time that's somewhat past, or do you feel that you still have a lot of fight left in you, or how much longer do you want to
I think that Thomas Hearns has a great deal of fight left in him. I don't feel that a need to walk away, a need to quit, because I'm happy. I'm very content with what I'm doing. I'm very happy when I can get out there in that ring and perform for you people, for everyone, all my fans, and make them happy by getting them what they pay to see. Then I'm very happy.
Well, you know it's going to be a war when he fights. And we go back, you and I, 12 years. I first did this piece at the very beginning when Tommy Hearns was just getting ready to fight.
You always told me that was going to be a secret between you and I.
That's right.
Now you tell it 12 years. He's getting old.
But here it is. This was the very beginning, the anthology of the young Tommy Hearns, right before the championship and right before the Leonard fight. Let's take a look back and listen.
I always want to be the champ. I've been boxing now for 12 years, and I've been working very hard for this day here to come. This fight here could make me or break me. And I'm definitely looking forward for this fight here to make me.
Detroit, Michigan. White trunks with red and blue stripes. He is known as the Motor City Cobra. Here's the undefeated hitman, Tommy Hearns.
Brings back some memories. Now he's about $1.85. You were about $1.40 there. You went up to 190, I was told, last month.
About 192.
Woo. Hey, before we go to the break, we've heard a lot about the Mike Tyson story, and it's a sad story, and maybe we'll talk about it in the next segment, but has boxing made you a better person? Not just a richer person, but has it made you a better person?
Well, as far as being able to go out to be able to deal with the public, there was a time in my life where I had no knowledge whatsoever about how to deal with the public. That's a special way that you must deal with the public, and I didn't know that. I had to learn that. Boxing have taught me a lot of great things over the years that I've been into boxing. And when I dealt with the media people, that was hard for me.
Yeah.
When I first started out.
You weren't comfortable with it?
I was not comfortable whatsoever. But now, I can sit down, I can carry on a conversation with you, and whoever it may be, and be comfortable with it.
We'll come back more with Tommy Hearns after this. Coming up tomorrow, Lem Barney of the Detroit Lions, recently elected to Pro Football's Hall of Fame. That's tomorrow, up close.
Travel arranged through Continental, with service to every major ski resort in Colorado and throughout the Rockies. Continental, one airline can make a difference.
Tommy Hearns grew up in a family of 9 kids, Detroit, Michigan. A lot of deprivation, some tragedy. Lost a brother to go to prison as well, shooting. But Tommy Hearns has never really had a scandal, unlike Mike Tyson. Tommy Hearns has never been in trouble. And like Mike Tyson, there was no father around, and the situation was very similar. Why was it different for you, Tommy?
I guess for me, it's just that I had probably greater values than Mike had. Mike, his values probably was a little bit different than what mine was. I had determination to make a difference, to set a path for my younger brothers and sisters, to be the role model. And this is what I set out to do. That's why I worked so hard, to be that positive role model for my younger brothers and sisters.
He continues to do it in the sport of boxing. As a sport that Red Smith once put it, there are no archbishops, but this is a good guy, Tommy Hearns, and he has been for 12 years or more. He's got a fight coming up on March 20 with Iran Barkley, Caesar's Palace, and TVKO. Good to see you again, my friend.
Again.
Stay well.
Appreciate it.
Come back, wrap things up close after this. We thank our guest, Montieth Illingworth, the author of Money, Myth, and Betrayal, the Mike Tyson story. Also, Thomas Hearns for joining us tomorrow. Lem Barney, Hall of Famer. That's tomorrow up close. We'll see you then.